thank you for giving up your time to talk to us here at the Razor's Edge. Talk to us about your new record. Really wanted to get started by learning more about your writing process. So it's been 4 years since the last album that you released has come out, and when you started writing this album, Netherheaven, did you have kind of ideas in place ready that you started working on, or was it a complete fresh slate that you started with when you started putting the writing down on it?
I think it was mostly. You mean since the Outer Ones came
Yes.
out?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been mostly a new, all new material. There was one song that we demoed out for the Outer Ones sessions that I wasn't fully happy with in terms of the structure. That we kind of, we paused on the completion of that song, and then I revisited it during the writing sessions for Netherheaven, and sort of retooled a bunch of things, moved some things around, added some more riffs, and it's sort of basically blossomed into like a totally different song from where it was. But I think that was sort of the only carryover from the previous album. Everything else was just fresh material that I was writing after the Outer Ones came out.
Am I right in because am I right in thinking that all the writing for this record was done by yourself during the whole session? You took care of the writing of the entire record. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote all the lyrics, I wrote all the guitars, I did, the majority of the structuring, and then, of course, I bring in, you know, Ash and Brett to add things like that. But yeah, I write the lion's share of the music, and I wrote all the lyrics and came up with the concept.
Just really interested in finding out the lyrical concepts that you look to use on Never Heaven. And was there a particular reason that you wanted that you chose those concepts to write about?
Um, yeah, so I mean, the new record is definitely has a hellish theme. Um, I discuss in my lyrics everything from just kind of general sort of imagery around the occult and demonic summonings to some things that have a sort of a hellish theme, but maybe are more sort of politically oriented, or so I should say, not maybe a hellish theme, but more of a satanic theme, like Diabolical Majesty is about the clash between the Satanic Temple and members of the religious right and politicians. Basically about the freedom of speech issues around putting up statue of the Baphomet on government property when certain local governments or state governments were putting up statues of Ten Commandments. There's supposed to be a separation of church and state,
Yeah.
obviously in the U.S. So things that were satanic themed around politics, sort of just general kind of concepts around hell, and that I've taken from literature, like the last track on the record, "Recrucified," is inspired by Dante's Inferno. So kind of taking classic literary uh, depictions of hell, and sort of writing about those. Um, so yeah, I think once I had the general concept in mind, I wanted to explore that as much as possible through as many different lenses as I could.
Okay. When you were writing, because the one thing I've kind of noticed via listening to the album is it's quite it basically it flows really, really well. And it's quite easy to listen through. And you can sometimes find with albums that you can get lost and maybe basically lose where you are track wise, which not necessarily sometimes can be a good thing, sometimes can't be. What I've noticed with this is it flows really, really well, and each song has its own particular identity, whilst remaining within the structure of how the album is. Did you find that when you had your bass ideas down, that it was quite easy to be able to craft the full songs out of that, or was it much more harder to get that sense that each individual track has its own basic identity and have it flow so well throughout all the tracks?
Um, so yeah, I think when I'm writing a record, I try to think about each song individually, because I'm focused on all the sort of the micro, and then I also think about the macro, right? So I'm thinking about each song as it pertains individually. Even going in further with a magnifying glass, like each riff. How can I make each riff better? How can I connect from riff A to riff B in a smooth transition? Does it just naturally flow there in an organic way, or maybe do I need another piece to get it from point A to point B? So I'm thinking about all those things, of course, and then you can't really think about how a record's going to sound if you only have like one or two songs done. But once I have, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 songs, in various stages of completion, then yeah, I start to think about the bigger picture of, okay, could this be a track one? This song would be better in the middle of the record. Is this going to be an instrumental piece? Maybe we should put that like in the middle of the album to kind of break up the flow of it like that. Even the last track on the record, like I going into it, I knew I wanted to write like just like kind of like a blazing, fast death metal ripper to kind of close out the record, because on a couple previous albums we've closed with more like epic songs. So now I'm not just taking into consideration the macro environment of this album, but of previous albums as well. And like have we done different things on previous records that maybe I want to try to avoid with this new one, just to kind of throw people for a curveball. I think maybe people would assume on a Revocation record, after the past 3 records, we're going to close with some kind of really epic song. So I think Recrucified is epic in its own right, but it certainly is just kind of like a pedal to the metal, like just like blazing fast ripper the whole way through, kind of just to end on this very boisterous note. So yeah, I think I take all those things into consideration. Some of it's conscious, some of it's unconscious. It's all just a byproduct of, I guess, having written almost 90 songs for this band at this point.
So because that's one thing I did notice with the album, is as I was listening through it, is that it starts with Diabolical Majesty, which is a straight up, again, very similar to that, just ripper death metal track. It finishes on, again, another similar style, just straight up raging track, and then between the two you've got movements where you've got some tracks which are more heavy on the groove side of things, then you've got the more progressive-y elements in the middle, especially with the instrumental track that you put in there, and then it just kind of like flows back into itself. That's kind of something that when I was listening to, I really enjoyed the way that it was moving between those different sounds and styles within the one album. It's still not sounding like 9 tracks that were all just placed there, if you get me.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that you like the flow of it.
With regard to obviously when you're bringing ideas into the band, and when you are writing songs, how do you find it particularly challenging to bring new ideas into what you're doing without taking away from who you are as a band? Because you'll see it, you will find it with certain artists, they will try and bring in things to their writing style, and they can pull it off, but it does kind of deviate quite far away from who they are and what they've obviously done previously. Is that something that is a conscious to you, to not try and deviate too far away from who you are and the identity of the band, or do you really not try and put that much thought into it and just trust your gut and do what you do with it?
Yeah, I think the most important thing of being like a musician or an artist in general is being true to yourself. I think we have developed our sound over time in an organic way. Every kind of different texture or dynamic or sound that we've experimented with over the years has, I think, just further grown the band. Sitting here and after, I think this is our 8th record, I'm very confident in the Revocation sound at this point. I think we've experimented in the past, and we continue to push our boundaries in different directions, but at the same time, yeah, I feel like I kind of know what the Revocation sound is, and sometimes I can still be surprised by it. Like there's certain things that we've tried different things even on this new record that have pushed us in different pushed our boundaries in different ways. I mean, for example, on the Outer Ones, there was no singing on that record at all. Whereas on Great Is Our Sin, that was the most singing we've ever done. Generally, if bands are starting to go down a path while they're adding more singing, they kind of continue on that path. And with the Outer Ones, there was just nothing. There was no parts on that record where I felt like I wanted to kind of do more of like a melodic vocal of, or I wanted it to be all of a death metal style. On this new record, we brought singing back again, but only for one track, and it was in a way that I've never done before. It on the song "Strange and Eternal." I sang. I was almost like envisioning like this weird demonic choir in my mind. I think having the infernal theme on the album, to me, that is so coupled with religious iconography, obviously, right? Like, I mean, all the concepts of hell and, are coming from, the Bible or sort of religious texts and whatnot. So to me, like, I envision a lot of, you know, Judeo-Christian imagery, if I'm thinking about a concept like hell. So yeah, I wanted to have this like evil choir part on Strange and Eternal. And I mean, I sang with multiple different tones of my voice. I mean, it was all just me, but I wanted it to sound like a group of different voices. Whereas oftentimes when you're singing and you're trying to do a harmony, you're kind of trying to blend with yourself. So
Yeah.
I purposely tried to like layer as many different tracks as I could to make it sound like this whole group of different people singing in this choir. So that was like a new thing for us that we've never done before. But I think it really added a cool element to the Revocation sound and to that track in particular. So I'm always searching for new inspiration. I'm always bringing new influences into the band, but at the same time, I do feel like we have a very kind of concrete sound at this point, and it's something that's sort of been forged in the fires of creativity over our entire career.
Cool. Artwork wise, because the artwork's extremely striking and it's very detailed, it's very in depth. You worked with Paolo Girardi on the artwork. How much of an influence did you as a band have with regard to this? Did you bring forward your ideas, or did you just basically say this is what I'll rephrase that a little bit. Did you have a vision in your head of what you wanted the cover to look like, or did you hand over the basis of what the album was going to be about and basically had them use their creative vision on what you were saying to create the artwork?
Yeah, anytime I'm working with an artist, especially on an album cover, I mean, I want it to be their vision, but I also want to give them some guidance,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, I gave him the album title, I gave him, the song titles. I think I may have even given him some lyrics, and then I gave him kind of like just different examples of imagery, whether it was like Hieronymus Bosch painting or like a modern death metal album cover or a classic death metal album cover that I thought was super cool, and just sort of gave him like this storyboard of ideas and said, okay, here, like, take it away. Paulo's an interesting artist. I mean, he's an incredible talent, and obviously, like, no one really looks like his style. But he has his own process. I asked him for a sketch, and he was like, I really don't do sketches. I just kind of like, attack the canvas and just put it all out there.
Yeah.
So, you have to obviously trust in someone's artistic abilities and their vision. But, we were working with him for a reason, and I loved his artwork. So I figured, like, okay, cool. Like, if sketches aren't part of his process, we just have to kind of like give up the reins and just go with where he takes us. And yeah, I think he delivered an incredible product. I think it's an crazy artwork. It doesn't look like anything we've had before in terms of album covers, and I think it captures the mood of Netherheaven perfectly.
How was the engineering of the record? Because I understand that you undertook some of this yourself, and it was the first time that you basically frolicked into this on a full length album. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the drums were recorded with Shane Frisbee at Brick Hit House, so that was the same studio that we did the drums on the last record with, but everything else was different. it's funny. I finally have something new to talk about when people ask me about the recording process, because for the past few records, it's all basically been the same. But yeah, during the pandemic, I tried to stay sane. I dove into my work. I tried to learn new skills that were all related to music or adjacent to it. Everyone kind of had to become their own audio engineer and videographer during the pandemic for us musicians. So I learned about recording, I learned about filming, and I was able to put those skills to the test in a very real way. It was a trial by fire. I mean, it was my first time doing a full length record, and it's very different than just recording a guest solo or recording like a one-off song for someone. I mean, there's file management, there's multiple things to keep track of. I mean, I was recording my vocals for the first time. I was recording, I was engineering Brett's bass lines when he was in the studio. So yeah, it was a whole bunch of new information, new problems that I had to tackle sort of in real time. So it was certainly a challenge, but I was really proud that I was able to rise to the occasion and record essentially the whole record besides the drums, and give it off to Jens Bogren, who mixed and mastered it, and there was thankfully no issues. So that's all I could hope for.
Is it something that you will now look to continue doing with Revocation, or will it be completely dependent on the circumstances?
I don't think ever going back into the studio again to record anything for Revocation or Gargoyle in terms of working with another producer. I think I'm just going to do it all myself. I mean, I learned a lot from this process, and I kind of want to like keep up with it. I feel like I'm just going to get that much better the more I do it. So yeah, I think this is definitely marks a new era in my life as a musician who can, is also versed in now some studio recording knowledge as well. So yeah, I'm definitely planning on for future projects, unless I'm doing something that requires it to be like live in a room.
Yeah.
That obviously would be a different scenario. But yeah, if I'm just home tracking a Revocation record, or even for my other project Gargoyle, I'm definitely planning on doing all the tracking myself from here on out.
You've got your North American tour, which is starting next month, and there's a European tour which I've seen booked up in, I think starts in February next year. Have you guys got much of a forward plan on how long you want the total tour cycle for this album to last? Given there's obviously been such a gap within your own touring cycle due to the pandemic.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of gas in the tank. I mean, we're just starting. I don't know how long the tour cycle will last per se. It's a little bit too early to tell. But if there's, if there's still enthusiasm around the record, and 2 years time, like we'll probably still be out touring. We used to kind of put out a record. Like I feel like it was like every 2 years we'd be coming out with a new record, and that's great and all when you're a young band, and you're just kind of staying out there, and there's just so much material. Now, like I kind of I think more of like a 3-year cycle if possible, because that way you can really tour on the record, you can take different opportunities that come up, and you can kind of allow people to sort of digest the material maybe in a better way too, rather than just every year you come up with something new. I like to, I'm kind of more of an old school guy where, I like my albums as, albums. I mean, I think maybe there's probably a new generation of people that just want singles.
Yeah.
And who knows how that will, change and evolve the music industry as time goes on. Maybe bands won't release full length records anymore. Maybe an album cycle will be 3 to 4 years, and it will be one record, but released as 3 or 4 different EPs, yeah. I can't say for sure. I think we're going to kind of, I want to stay true to our old school aesthetics, but at the same time, doing something the same way over and over again has its merits, but I'm not opposed to trying things different ways. So we'll see how everything goes with this record. But I certainly think that there's, yeah, I mean, we got a full tank of gas, and we're ready to just hit the road and crush it and bring Netherheaven, to as many places worldwide as we can. And that's not even taking into account, potential, tour offers that might
Yeah.
come up. I mean, we're in control of our schedule. If we're headlining, obviously we can say, hey, we want to go out, on these dates, and discuss a lineup with the booking agent and our manager. But if I don't know, Slayer reunites and they want us to go on tour with them next fall or something like that. If we had plans to record, obviously we're going to say, all right, maybe we should move the recording plans and take the Slayer tour instead. So there's you have your known knowns and your known unknowns and your unknown unknowns, as they say, right? So there's always sort of opportunities out there that might just kind of come across your lap that you never even thought of. I mean, that happened to us when we were out on our co-headlining tour with Voivod. We were doing a North American tour with Voivod, and we were all planning on going home, and then we got a call from Killswitch Engage, and they said, hey, we want you guys to come out on tour. The shows are already sold out. It wasn't even like they needed like a band on there to help promote it. It was like already like sold out or close to it. They just wanted to have us out like on the road to support them. So at that point, you can't turn it down. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what types of cool opportunities just sort of randomly pop up, because that's how it is. It's not like you get like a warning or this or that. Like all of a sudden you just see an email from your booking agent and says like, hey, so-and-so wants to know if you're available. And I think you got to take those opportunities when they come, if it makes sense, of course.
With regard to your North American tour, because it's starting the day the album gets released, does that affect the way you look at building a set list? Because obviously, if with doing it on essentially starting on release day, earlier in the tour cycle, there's probably not as much chance for people to digest the new material. Is that something that you think about, or is it just whatever? This, we're going to build the strongest set list possible of old and new material.
Yeah, I think it's more the latter. I mean, like I'm excited to play some songs live that maybe people like are hearing for the first time, or maybe they've had a week with the material.
Yeah.
So like they're not as familiar. Certainly, a couple of the singles have been out for a while, so I think people will have some familiarity with the music. But it will be kind of cool just to kind of sort of blindside people with some brand new stuff that they maybe aren't as familiar with, and just kind of and then they can go back and listen to the record afterwards and say, oh yeah, they played that they opened with that song, like, oh cool, like that. I gotta go spend more time with that track. But I'm also thinking about it like, because it is a brand new record, like we didn't want to come out and do like Netherheaven in its entirety or something like that either. We wanted to give people some other songs from our catalog that they're more familiar with, that they've had more time to digest, and that they maybe are looking forward to seeing live. I think it's cool when a band comes out and plays a record in its entirety, but for me, I like to do that more like kind of at the back end of the album cycle, when people have had more time to digest it than at the front end.
I mean, last question from me, before obviously we start wrapping this up, is you've obviously built this long career. You've got multiple full lengths albums out there. Is there anything that you look back on and think, I really wish I could redo that? Is there anything that you think, or is there anything you think, I really wished I'd taken up that opportunity with regard to what we've what you've brought forward and what you've turned Revocation into at all, please?
I don't know. I mean, there's probably songs that I've written for Revocation that maybe like I wouldn't write, now as a musician, being 36 years old. But I think it's all part of like the process of learning and creative growth. So it's like, I think some of that material I needed to get out of my system in order to make room for new material. So I try not to dwell in the past. I try to just move forward. And if there's, songs in our catalog that I don't think we're ever going to play live again, I don't necessarily look back and say, oh, I wish I never wrote that. It's more like, okay, cool. Like, I'm glad that I wrote that. I got it out of my system, and now I can, move on to, new material, new creative avenues, rather than being hung up on some old idea that like, I wish I got to explore or something. And that's the thing about music. You never know. A song that I might not be like as in love with anymore, that might be someone's favorite Revocation song ever. So that's sort of the beautiful thing about art and music. And you're always going to get that person that, thinks the first album is the best, right? Where for me, like, I think our newest album's the best, but how a fan might interact with our catalog is probably going to be different than how I interact with it. But thank you so much for this interview.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you keep up to date with future episodes by subscribing to our channels. For more information on this podcast, or for all the latest music news, reviews, interviews and more, head over to our website, www.therazorsedge.rocks.